In the Gulf of Mexico, there's a dead zone. It lays just outside the Mississippi Delta and is covered in algae that spreads out for miles and miles. Little to no fish are able to survive in such an area of pollution. The excessive nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers combined with the runoff of sewage that streams from as far north as Canada stretches out into the Gulf, seeming to kill off everything that lives under the water within the delta. This might partly be true and makes sense to the scientists who speculate and write their papers based mostly on what the last scientist wrote. It is not the case, not according to my theories and research. The first people to inhabit this region were Native Americans. They did not have books to pass down, but they did have stories and dances, tales that were passed down from generation to generation. There was a dance that the Chimkuki would perform in the late spring, after the heavy rains had come. For weeks, they would wait for the swell of water to make its way down the Mississippi and all its small tributaries that fed into the long Mississippi. They were a small tribe that intentionally kept themselves isolated from the other tribes that lived only upon the solid ground. Their only alliance was to trade for those food and things they could not make on their own. These gatherings would take place only a few of them, to keep the landlocked tribes from knowing or guessing the number of their tribe. So the secret of their tribe was that the other tribes often called them the serpents. They would slither into the river after the trading was complete, leaving the other tribes afraid of following. They did not use canoes. They seemed like ghost serpents, who simply stepped into the churning, flowing water and disappeared for another year. The tribe based its system on agriculture because of the rich and fertile lands that the delta seemed to provide. Their lands were always shifting, changing, and fading away from season to season. They built only minimal villages on the shallow islands, building and developing a hierarchy system similar to India's caste system, the smaller tribes all spreading out from island to island, and each becoming unique in its own way. The farther into the Mississippi Delta the tribes lived, the more seclusive they became. This all changed on the Day of the Serpent. The song they sing and dance while they perform in the late spring tells this tale of a creature that awoke in the murky sand and mud-filled banks near the river, what is now known as the Netches. They sing of how it came from the ground, and as it slithered up from the center of the earth, it left a giant hole that took 1,000 years to fill. The beast was so big that as it made its way through this stretch of river, it created turns and twists that can still be seen today. Crooked as a snake crawls, some have said, and they have no idea how right they are. The coming of the beast shook the very foundations of their hierarchy, splitting the tribe into sects that sought out even more isolation. Each tribe, however, developed their own form of religion, worshipping this great new beast. The songs describe a beast covered in scales, made of stone, and its body as wide as the river. This was no mere rattlesnake. It had gills larger than pines, and nostrils the size of teepees, as the story tells. They believed it to be an ancient god that grew from the egg that is around the planet we live on. The beast's name has been lost throughout the years, but the song flow is still one of the old ones who remains, who still looks upon the water with respect and a healthy dose of fear. I know that a bunch of Native American folklore isn't concrete proof of the beast's existence, but hear me out. Now, if you remember that the Great Serpent slithered down the Mississippi River and presumably into the ocean, if you have looked onto the maps drawn by the ancient ocean-sailing kingdoms, you see there is often a serpent, a giant creature that attacks the ships and feeds upon the sailors. You might claim that those were simply stories told among drunk and lonely sailors to pass the time. But do you remember something far more recent called the Deepwater Horizon oil spill of 2010? The Deepwater was one of the most modern and safe oil rigs ever built and designed. It was built to drill into the ultra-deep regions of the ocean at record depths. What could cause such disaster? The rig collapsed and sank to the bottom of the ocean after exploding, leaving a raging well that spewed oil for months. all over the seawater and down to the coast. In the weeks before the disaster, the crew in the deep water had seen giant dark spots in the ocean. Not something big that swam just under the surface, but something much more menacing and frightening. It seemed to be hundreds of feet of the water, and still the dark serpentine shape could still be writhing and moving so far down. Those stories have been told by fishermen and oil rig workers for half a century in bars and shacks all along the Gulf Coast. I think it's all happenstance, it's no mystery, and I think the Deepwater Horizon incident wasn't just an engineering error on BP's part. What I believe is that they agitated that beast, stirred it up, and suffered for their trespassing. The serpent beast had had enough encircling its prey, much like a python, squeezing it to death. If my calculations are correct, and assuming the beast is at least 10,000 feet long and almost 3,000 feet wide, the entire area it inhabited would be drained of oxygen and fish in short order. It would seem almost as if natural disaster had happened, causing a die-off of fish in a dead spot in the water that spanned miles. Judging from the beast's paths to nature and countless similarities with reptiles, I believe the beast is coming out of a long hibernation, possibly brought on by climate change warming the waters of the Gulf. As it awakens and feeds to grow, so too does the dead zone. This year, estimates indicate that it will be the largest dead zone on record for the Gulf, and I have at least gotten funding to take an expedition to the dead zone and prove my theory. I hope to God I'm wrong.